Hey, what's up everybody? This is Adam with Reese Customs, and today we're going to take all of this red oak and turn it into a beautiful island countertop. You can see how massive this board is, but we're going to have to cut it all down. Unfortunately, this is like a 16.5-inch wide board. This is a big old tree, but we're going to have to cut it down into some usable pieces. This wood is surfaced on both sides, but the edges are not. So that's what we're going to have to deal with first. We're going to tackle getting the edges square. We're going to rip them all down to 6 inches wide and glue them up. So let's do it.
Okay guys, so here what we're going to do is we're going to take the boards and run them through the table saw, and they're pretty straight, but they're not dead straight on one edge. Not like they just came off a joiner, but they're straight enough to where when you run it down the fence of the table saw, it will leave a straight cut on the cut edge, if that makes sense. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting these down. This was a wide one. Cutting it down, and then I'll flip it, adjust my fence, and then cut it to the final dimensions, a little bit thick of the final dimensions, with the straight edge that we cut first against the fence this time. So that leaves us with two parallel edges on the boards. Now everything was going good. I was zipping through the boards until this one, and this isn't even the widest board. I did the widest one first. So you can see I start to push it into the saw blade, and I got some resistance, and actually tripped the saw blade off, and I didn't quite. I thought maybe I had the board, pushed one way or the other, so I was binding it. So checked it, made sure I was square to the fence, and tried again. And so you can see here, I push it in and it binds yet again. So now this is a good time for me to stop and say, something's not right here. But hard-headed as I am sometimes, I tried again. So I looked at it, I flipped it over so the other edge was against the fence. I was thinking maybe the first edge had a bow in it or something, but the other side bound as well. So you see it's binding there, and I thought I was moving it side to side. I adjusted it a little bit side to side, still did the same thing, bound up. I flipped it end for end and tried on the other end, and it did the same thing. So any sane person, after trying this many times and it binding this many times, would probably stop. Not me. For some reason I kept pushing it, and then I actually decided to stop, check it out. You see, that's my thinking face there. I'm going, what's wrong with this thing? Why in the world is it binding up like this? So I decided to, let's look at it. Maybe the edge is bowed. Maybe no, looks good. It's pretty straight on that side. It's not bowed, but let's see. All right, we'll take that good straight edge that we got, and we'll put it up next to the saw, and let's try again, which you would think I'd learn by like 6 tries, but nope. So I try to push this one, and you'll see what happens. Starts to feed in. It's not good. Alright, well, I'm thinking, oh yeah, here we go. But nope. Get some resistance, and actually pushes my saw off my concrete's unlevel there, so it pushes it onto a more unlevel part. I'm scratching my head, I'm confused. I'm like, this isn't right, something's wrong with this. So I'm going to turn off come push my saw back up, and then I put a little block of wood just so it won't roll off again. So I know you're thinking, alright, well, he's learned his lesson now, right? So obviously he's not going to try to push that thing through again. And that's where you'd be wrong. So I turn on the saw yet again. I just braced up the saw so it wouldn't get pushed off the ledge. Turn it on and try it another time. So sometimes, when you're in the heat of things and you're working in the shop, you don't use your brain like you should. And this was one of those times. I couldn't see anything wrong. The edges were straight. I was holding the board straight. It should have cut through, no problem. And it didn't. So instead of stopping and using a question attitude, I just kept on forcing it until finally I said, wait a minute, this isn't right. And it bound up pretty good on the blade. It was stuck pretty good. And I have a confused look on my face, I know, but I just kind of am perplexed at this point. I'm like, something's not right. I'm going to set this back over here and think about this for a little bit. So I thought about it. I stopped for a minute. I looked at it. I thought about it. And that brings us to this next clip. And I'll get into explaining really what happened. And essentially, it's internal stresses in the wood. It was pinching the blade. And that's where we're at.
Okay, so hopefully you saw in the video that this board gave us some trouble on the table saw, and what it boils down to is there's internal stresses in the board itself, and as it was cutting, it's starting to pinch and twist and stuff like that. So what I did is I popped the chalk line, I measured, popped the chalk line, and I'm going to run my circular saw down and cut it down. Then I'll go back to the table saw and square it back up. Side note, if I had a track saw, like a Makita or Festool or Win or Craig, anybody, if anybody wants to send me one, hey, that's cool. I don't care what brand it is. But if I had a track saw, I could lay these out, and instead of hassling with the table saw, lay the track down, rip it straight, and then that'd be ready to glue together. But knowing that the table saw doesn't make, part of it's because my blade's bad, or not bad, it needs sharpening, but it's not a perfect cut, so I'm still going to have to hand plane these edges so it'll fit together nicely. But in this case, I do believe a track saw would probably eliminate that. But don't have one, so maybe I'll get one day. So now I'm going to rip this down and then go back to the table saw. So there was quite a bit of stress on the board. Maybe you could see it when I was cutting it. This side was twisting up a good deal more than this side. But we've got it down now. So what we're going to do now is run this side, although it's not 100% perfectly flat, it's pretty flat and straight. But we're going to run this side against the fence, trim this rough edge off, and to get it squared up. Then we'll flip it around and run it back through to get it to the final width. Whew! Long boards. They're fun. It's going to be a cool looking island though. Okay, so I got all the boards laid out on the floor. It looks small down here, but you can see with me on it, this is a big piece of counter. So I've got the boards laid out like I want them, alternating grain directions. I'm gonna mark them all, and then we got to get these edges all straight so when we glue them up, they'll be nice and tight. So we're gonna have to work on those by hand. Might use a joiner, but they're gonna be kind of unwieldy on the joiner. So we'll see. I'll think about it. Alright, so what I'm doing now is I'm gonna clean up these edges some and kind of see where we stand there once they're all cleaned up and flat. The best way to do that for me would be hand planes, and I just got the boards clamped together to hold them stable. The one I'm working on is raised up a little bit. I did this one first, and I'm doing this one, but I'm just going to go across. Playing off some. Feels smooth. I don't see any saw marks or anything anymore. And we'll get all the sides of this one, because these three we're going to glue together, and then the three on the floor we're going to glue together. So we're going to try to get this one nice and flush. Glue it up, then we'll work on that one while the glue's drying on this one. But okay, so hopefully you can see with just 3 clamps on it, a little bit of hand planing, got all the joints nice and tight. You can see there's a little bit of a overhang in some spots. See, like this flat flush here, a little bit down here, flush here, a little bit down here. That's just because over the length of the boards, they're just like naturally bowed a little bit. And so what I think we're going to do is ordinarily on this glue up, on this going with the grain like this, long grain, we wouldn't need any sort of reinforcement. The glue bond is strong enough to hold this. But I think on this one, we're probably going to put some biscuits in it, and not for structural reasons, because it doesn't need it for structural reasons, but just for alignment reasons. So if you think about, when you cut a biscuit in from the top of this surface down a certain specified amount, and then you cut it down from this board down a specified amount, and you put them together, the tops of the boards should line up. So we'll just have to mark out where we want them. We'll probably do, several of them all the way down. And I'll choose some of the spots that have the biggest difference. And the only problem comes with that is when we glue it up, it's going to be a little bit trickier because it's naturally going to want to move. So we're going to getting the biscuits to fit all together when we glue up is a little bit trickier. I have Type Bond 2 for this, so we got a little bit more working time than just the original Type Bond. I might even use Type Bond 3 to give us even more working time. But that's enough rambling. I'm gonna mark for biscuits. Okay, so I spared the agony of recording cutting all these biscuits, but basically now you can see, hopefully you can see, I just got it clamped up. It's not glued or anything, this is just clamped still, but now there's no huge height variations. So the biscuits help level everything out. That's just going to make it a whole lot easier when we go to sand it all flat. So now, let's see, okay, looks like a crack on camera. But now we're ready to glue this section up. So I'm going to get some more clamps, set everything up, clear off the table, and get ready to glue. So, okay, now it's time for the glue up. Thank you, Rockler, for sponsoring this video. Just kidding. Rockler didn't sponsor it. Thank you, Adam, for sponsoring this video. Oh, you're welcome. So, make sure we get lots of glue here. We'll scrape off what spills out later. But we'll make sure the whole thing's covered really well. Cover this one. And this one. I've got a little silicone brush. I got it from Man Tool, but it's from Rockler. Rockler sells it, but I'm just going to take that and just make sure everything's coated really well. I just want every single surface to have glue on it. This thing's pretty cool because once you spread out all the glue, once the glue dries on, then you get to peel it off. I know some of you probably put Elmer's glue on your hands when you were little and peeled that off because it's fun. Don't pretend like you did. Maybe you still do, I don't know. So lay these down. Line up our marks. Clamp just fell on my foot. And bring it together. That one's off a little bit. There we go. Everything's really flat. There's a tiny bit of a tiny bit in some places, but that's perfectly fine. So now all we have to do is do all of this again to that set, and then we'll be ready to put the two halves together. So, all right, so this is the second half of the table. First half is up over there, glued up. Glued this up several hours ago, so it's bonded enough that we can take off the clamps, but we wouldn't want to put a lot of stress on it. So I'm gonna take the clamps off, lay it down, put the other piece next to it, and then we'll cut biscuits in it just like before and join them together. Now my existing clamps were not long enough to do to clamp the entire 36 inches. I have some longer clamps, but they're weaker. They're aluminum clamps and they're weaker, and I don't like to use them for tables and stuff like that. So what I did is I bought some more some more pipe. I have black iron pipe on these. This is galvanized. Really the only difference is this doesn't leave little spots on your wood if it gets glue on it. And also it's like $2 cheaper for the galvanized. So that's one of the cool things about pipe clamps is if you need a longer clamp, you could just get a longer pipe instead of buying a longer clamp. For instance, a 48-inch bar clamp is about 50 bucks, whereas the 48-inch piece of pipe is 26 bucks. So I'll eventually buy more clamps themselves so I can just have more, period. But for now, I just need a little bit longer reach. So I picked up 6 of these, and we're going to remove these and start joining them together. So here's a massive countertop. I've got it dry fit together so I can mark out the locations of the biscuits. You can see this is the 2 separate pieces, and there's a height difference here and down there, but all that will be taken care of when we put the biscuits in it to get it lined up. I just wanted to make sure that once it was in clamps that the seam is tight and there's no gap or anything like that. So we're good on that. So now mark out the biscuits, undo all the clamps, cut the biscuits, put them in, glue them together, clamp it up, and then I'll be back tomorrow for the sanding. So see you then, because the other stuff's pretty boring. Okay, so here's our top. It is glued up out of the clamps, and it is a big piece of countertop. We're going to make it a little bit less big. We just have to, we're going to take 10 inches off the end and about 1.5 inches off the width. So okay, so that we're cut the size, and just to double check ourselves, 36 on the dot, 36, 36, 36. We're looking good. So that just goes to show you, you don't have to have the latest and greatest Festool, and not knocking it because I'd love to have some of that stuff. But don't let it discourage you if you don't have the best tools out there. You still can get the job done. So now that we're to size, we're going to go ahead and start sanding. We're going to start sanding with a 60 grit. But before that, we're going to take this scraper. Now, if you don't have one of these, I use this for all sorts of things. It's a carbide scraper. You can get it from Lowe's in the paint section. No affiliation or anything with them, but it works really great. And I'm going to go ahead and scrape up some of these glue bubbles before we start. It just helps so they don't clog up the sandpaper or anything like that. But basically you can just take it, go over it, and knock all them glue bubbles off, the little drips. And I'll do that, and then I'll get the sander set up. All right, so now it's sanding time. I've got my pencil marks drawn on the table like you've probably seen me do in other videos. If not, you probably should check out the other videos too. But I've got my Bosch 6-inch sander. This thing's awesome. I've recommended it before in my other videos. Not sponsored or anything, but I bought it. It's just super nice. We're gonna switch it to turbo mode. Got a 60 grit disc on here hooked up to our vacuum, and now we're gonna sand. But I'm gonna spare you the boredom of watching me sand this whole table. So I'll be back after we're sanded. All right, so I got a initial sanding with the 60 grit on the turbo setting, and that knocked down a lot of the high spots. You can see it's pretty flat, but it's not dead flat. It's not as flat as we can get it. It'll never be 100% just granite slab like flat, because it is wood and we are sanding it, and some grains sand out easier than others and all that stuff, but we can get it really flat. And how we do that is mark it up with pencil markings. We're going to keep 60 grit on the sander. I'm gonna turn it to orbital mode just so it doesn't leave such bad scratches. And I'm gonna start taking off these pencil lines. Now, what we're looking for is to take down all the high spots. Now there's high and low spots. You can't do anything with the low areas. You have to take down the high areas around them. I've mentioned that before. Okay, so I have the top sanded with 60 grit all the way flat. Flipped it over. This is the bottom. You see this big knot hole. It doesn't go all the way through. It's just a knot. That's why we put it on the bottom side. But this is a piece of countertop, right? So unlike a table or a desk or something like that, no one will ever see the bottom once it's installed. It's going to go over cabinets. You'll never ever see it. However, that being said, we still want to finish the bottom, the side, the same way we do the top. We're going to spray it the same way we are the top, just because we want the entire piece sealed so one side doesn't absorb more humidity than the other side. So if we had left this raw and just sealed the top, then there's a chance the bottom, well, it's a very high chance, highly likely, that the bottom would absorb more moisture and the piece would move in ways that we don't want it to move. It would cup pretty bad. So while I've got it flipped over, I'm going to go ahead and finish this, spray the top, put all the coats on, spray the bottom, put all the coats on it before we flip it over, and then do the top and the edges and all that stuff. So almost got this sanded up, getting ready to spray it. I'm going to spray it just like I spray everything in my videos with an HVLP gun. You can go back and watch some of the other videos. It's a pretty simple process to spray a pre-catalyzed lacquer. It works great, holds up great. We'll probably put 4 coats on the bottom, and then once we flip it for the top and the sides, we'll put 5, maybe 6 coats total on it. So I'm gonna keep sanding and get to spraying. All right, so the bottom side is finished. Isn't that pretty? I got it on a blanket now to protect the bottom. And so now we're gonna work on the top again. The bottom side is totally done. So now we're gonna work on the top. And what we have to do, we're gonna do these edges first, sand the edges down where my skill saw burned them a little bit. We're going to round them over with a router. Oh, there we go. So we're gonna sand them down. We're gonna route them over with a router just to knock that sharp edge off. And then we're gonna sand the top and spray it. So that's what's next. So we got our edges all cleaned up and looking nice. Now we're about to sand on the top. This is already done with 60. So we're gonna go 100, 150, and then 220. So, lots and lots of sanding. All right, the final sanding is complete. Now we're just gonna hit these roundovers a little bit by hand. Make sure it all blends real good. And then we'll be ready to spray. All right, I'm about to lay down the third coat for today. Then we're gonna let it sit till tomorrow. Sand it all with 220 and put the final-ish coat. We'll see how it looks, but the fourth coat may be the final. We may want more build on it, so we'll have to see tomorrow. But let's spray that third coat. Okay, so we got 3 coats of lacquer on this top. We're going to hit it now with some 320 grit. I just have a little white pad just to soften it up. But we're going to hit the whole thing real good with 320, spray it down with compressed air, wipe it down, and spray a final coat, which may be the final coat. We'll tell after we spray it if we like how it looks. I say we, it's just me, but if I like how it looks, that'll be good. If not, I'll add another coat or something, but it's looking really good right now, so probably one more coat will be all it needs. But I'm hitting now just to make sure there's no rough spots, no trash or anything in the finish. And basically, I just go with the grain, and you can feel the difference. Just like this. Do the whole thing, clean it off, and spray it again. So